All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Tony Martinez of the CDPE, the Certified Distressed Property Expert. We are excited because we have a celebrity here today, and there she is. She's responding just like I thought she would because she's so humble. But I am just so honored to have Melody Wright here with us today. Before we get into it, I just want to make sure you guys know the protocol. We want to try to get through as many questions as we can today and cover as much information. You have the Q&A feature there. Use it. Start off by maybe telling us what area is represented here today. And then what we're going to do as we progress, we're going to go ahead and pause from time to time to go ahead and take as many of your questions as possible. We are recording this. The goal is to go ahead and get the replay out as early as this evening, late afternoon. I see that Arizona is in the house, California. The good news about Arizona and California, you guys don't have anything to worry about when it comes to foreclosures. Okay, was that mean? Was that mean? I'm not trying to be mean, but you know what? If you were around during the great financial crisis, this is deja vu all over again. It's kind of like the usual suspects, but there's a lot of folks out here that have no clue who I am. Well, let's go ahead and start with the organization that I own and represent, the Certified Distressed Property Expert. If you were a real estate agent back in 2008, 9, and 10, then you know that short sales became the name of the game back then. And at the beginning of that crisis, there was next to no training available in this arena. Well, it was a couple out of South Florida, Alex and Katie Sharfin, that created the Certified Distressed Property Expert, or CDPE, not to be confused with the COPD. That's a completely other thing there. But you know what? They came to the market with an amazing product at the amazing time. I met them toward the end of 2008 when they only had about 500 or 600 members, taught my first class in 2009, became their lead instructor, their instructor of instructors, traveled the country for 2.5 years to full rooms everywhere, trying to find out how we're going to survive in this market. And then after a while, things settled down. I became a broker because that's the other hat that I wear. I am a broker associate in the great state of Florida. And then people didn't really talk a whole lot about foreclosures and short sales or any of that kind of stuff. Well, let's fast forward to 2020 when COVID hit. And we were completely unsure about what was going to happen, right? Were real estate agents essential? Will we be able to work? I saw all these people unemployed. I saw all these businesses closing down. I started looking down the future and I go, you know what? Maybe it's time to dust off this training again. And one of the main reasons why I did it was because I saw so many Americans go into forbearance. You can't have about 8 million, 8.5 million people say, okay, I don't have to pay my mortgage. Happy day. And not expect that a certain percentage of them are going to not realize that at some point they have to pay that back. Well, anyway, turns out that the old CDP has shut down. Well, I had to change that. So my wife gave me permission to buy it. Everything I do is based on her consent. And yes, she is watching and listening, so I am kissing up. And you know what? We brought it back in 2021. And let me tell you something. I got insults left and right. And some people hailed me as a hero. Other people say, you money grabber, you this and that. How dare you? Man, the industry did not want me at all. So here we are, 3 years later, 4 years later, and maybe, just maybe, the timing is a little different. So enough about me. Let's move on. So I've been following on X, formerly Twitter, and I came across this individual named Melody Wright. And I'm reading and I'm watching and what she's saying, and I'm going, oh my God, I've heard that before. In my head, she's saying a lot of the things that I believe. And you know what they say, that you're not a prophet in your own neighborhood, in your own backyard. Well, ain't nobody want to hear it from me. What do I know, right? And so I reached out. I sent an email. I sent a prayer. So I just hope she responds and she says yes to being on the call. And she is so gracious to give up her time. So Melody, thank you, and welcome.
It is my pleasure, and I am thrilled to join a fellow default expert because we are few and far between.
Yes, I think the smart ones got out.
They did. They retired. They ran. They never looked back. Yep.
They never looked back. within our movement, the CDPE, the folks that were CDPE back in the day, we call them OGs. And
Yes.
that's an affectionate moniker for them. And people say, what does the OG stand for? And I says, well, it could be old guard. It could be original gangster. Take your pick. And I had one guy out of class said, "Old goat." I go, wait a minute. Now we're going too far. So there's a
Right.
lot of folks on this call here that know exactly what we're talking about because they were around back then. But let's face it, most of the folks in attendance here today are real estate professionals, and maybe they weren't licensed in 2008, 9, and 10. They have no idea what we're talking about. So I would just like for you to go ahead and take a little bit of time to introduce yourself and what your background is.
Sure. So I fell into mortgage. Everybody falls into mortgage. No one grows up and says, I want to work in mortgage. Mortgage means death pledge, in case people don't know.
Yes.
Okay. So I fell into mortgage in 2006 for lack of a better idea after grad school. I was studying, stupidly American literature, although, I'm very grateful for my my education. But I needed a job. I needed to pay off student loans. And I, went into an organization that had a project analyst role. And I applied and they asked me, what made you want to work at a mortgage company? I said, this is a mortgage company. I had no idea. That was September of 2006. By October, I went to a party where balloons were falling from the ceiling and we were walking around a life-size Lego house and everyone was celebrating. This is 2006 in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Just how awesome of a year they'd had. Now, my company was one of the top subprime lenders, but we always lent to really good credit quality. Our Alt-A theoretically was good credit quality. And then we quickly transitioned to do majority government lending. So, but basically, I looked around me at all this jubilation and I was so confused. And I turned to my colleague and said, is this Enron? This is
Oh my.
important because we will talk about, October 2021 and a similar experience.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Yes.
quickly fast forward at the time, Cerberus Private Equity had signed up to buy my company because they had made such a profit. We were the crown jewel of GM at the time. At the time, a few months later, that would all change drastically. And this background is really important because we're going to be talking about this time period specifically as we get into kind of delinquency and foreclosure. And so what happened is that company Cerberus was like, oh no, they saw that the market was turning and they wanted a purchase price adjustment. And so we had to do our write downs way before Chase and Bank of America and others did. So we were very early to the game. And by the time we get to 2007, I'm walking in and I worked in corporate financial planning and analysis. So I set it on top of both the origination and servicing business, just telling my executives what's happening in the company, what's happening in the market. And that's how I got started. And I became Cerberus's kind of girl Friday. I went around all the company getting their reports to start to understand the business. But very quickly, we realized that the fun was over. And from that point forward, it was just pain that lasted. In 2010, we had a brief respite where we thought, similarly to like what's happening today, we're seeing those rate drops happen. We thought we could, really stimulate the economy with a little refi boom. But that at that point, the consumer was so tapped out and was, in distress. So they really could not refi at the rate that everybody wanted. And then, fast forward, my company goes into bankruptcy in 2012, but it's not for why you think. It was not our subprime portfolio that
Right.
took us down. In fact, by 2007, early 2007, we were already, subprime was only 12% of the portfolio. And that number is very important because right now, FHA, which is about 13 to 15% of the market, depending on the quarter, what's going on, they are over 13% delinquent. And and so I'm going to give some stats in a few minutes that'll show you that we are in a very similar position to last time. It's just that the characters have changed, and
Right.
that's really, really important. Okay. So essentially, we went into bankruptcy because my CEO decided in 2009 that we were going to go gangbusters into FHA. Okay, because when you're in the origination game from a bank non-bank perspective, Ginnie Mae looks great because you get a higher bump on the upfront. Like it's more juice when you get that gain on sale, which is the gain that you make when you sell that loan to the agencies. Now, a lot of people on this call might know this, but many people don't realize that in reality, 85% of mortgages outstanding are owned by the government or a government sponsored enterprise, be that Fannie and Freddie. So they really drive the entire market. And this is important because what's happened, so FHA took us down. So we got that juice. We thought, this is what we're going to do. We get more on the upfront. We're a good servicer. We're going to figure this all out. Surely they are backed 100% by the government. So what could go wrong? Well, what goes wrong is when you file those claims, think about your insurance company
Yeah.
and how they deny first. They make you fight for it. They slow roll it. And so basically everything becomes a real liquidity drain. And so you are just not capable of keeping up, while at the same time, the GSEs are going to turn around and make you repurchase all of the loans that you sold to them. And they're going to make up reasons for it. They're going to say you didn't cross that T. And by that point of the cycle, all the originators are out of business or they've moved on. And so there's really no one to turn around and put that back to them. And so FHA took my company down because of the top 5 mortgage originators and servicers at the time. We were the only non-bank. Although we became a bank through Ally, we were initially a non-bank. And so we had a little tiny bank in Utah, but that's a whole different thing. We had no deposits. We had to use large liquidity facilities from the banks to survive. So I want everybody to think about this too, thinking about Rocket, UW, these places. They are non-banks. They do not have deposits. They are also big into FHA product. And we are just beginning the game for them. And none of the people at those organizations were actually around last time. So they don't actually know what they're in store
Right.
for.
Yeah. If I may, let me
Sure.
ask, I also want to state, I know that there's a lot of fear mongering out there, right?
Sure.
And I think a lot of people have used the topic as a way of garnishing more likes and everything else. And you know what? I never ever got that impression from you. I think that you're a numbers person, right? You look at the numbers because we're all entitled to our own opinions, but not our own facts. And
Correct.
so my goal today wasn't to freak people out because I'm a real estate broker myself. I'm a believer in the American dream. I want Americans to be able to own their homes and stay in their homes. But I also know that, you know what, bad things happen to good people every single day.
That's right.
When I work a show, the most common two common questions I'm asked is, so Tony, are foreclosures coming back? And my answer is, well, they never went away. You know, there's this from the day the homeownership became a thing, foreclosure became a thing right after. So it never went away. It just stopped being sexy. It wasn't front page news anymore. And I go, yeah, but is it going to be as bad as it was before? And you know what my answer is? Just I get to the point. I go, listen, for whomever is going through it, it's bad enough. And what's really
Totally.
bothers me about our industry is that there's so many people out there, leaders, I mean, so-called leaders of real estate companies and everything, that are saying, when it gets that bad, then we'll pay attention. And I'm going, what about the people that need help now?
Right.
You know, so my primary motivation here is for people to get information that if they choose to believe, great. They choose not to, well, let them go out there and do their due diligence. But as an industry, real estate agents, we have got to mobilize because there are people out there hurting right now. There are people out there losing their homes, and the wrong people are approaching them first. And I'd like to talk to you more about that later. But I will ask you a very, very direct question that's on everybody's mind right now. And that is there a possibility that it could get as bad as it was in 08, 9, and 10?
So, as you say, we're not here to fearmonger, and I do not have any desire. In fact, Tony, I never wanted to go on social media in the first place. That was I didn't have Facebook. I was not one of those people. I every single new follower almost makes me more stressed out because this is not what I want to be doing. So, my point in saying that is that I'm not engagement farming. I'm trying to share the facts and
Hmm.
share the numbers and triangulate all the data out there to give people the most clear picture of the path. And often what people say to me is that I'm a crash bro. I'm like, hey, I'm a crash sister, but whatever. That, honestly, I'm calling the path. I'm not predicting anything. I'm telling you what the data says. And when the data starts changing, then I'm going to start changing. But to simply answer your question, Tony, it could be much worse because what got us out of the crisis, Wall Street came in at the behest of the agencies, Fannie and Freddie, to come in and buy up those distressed properties. Well, guess what? They can't afford to do that anymore because they bought up all those properties and turned them into long term rentals. And what's happened is that insurance has increased exponentially. Property taxes for non owner occupancies have increased exponentially. Replacement costs, things like this. And so it was very lucrative for them to buy that when they could get cheap borrowings from somewhere, buy those properties up, and then they were making more. Their cash flow was such that they were making more. It was profitable. At
Hmm.
these home prices, Wall Street cannot come in. They can't afford it. In fact, institutional investors are already offloading in several key markets, Texas and Florida, Atlanta, places like this where they got in very, very heavily. So, to state again, this could be worse because you might actually see that crisis play out without sort of someone like Wall Street kind of stepping in. So there is that possibility.
Okay, well, listen, that's fair. That's fair. It is a possibility. No one is saying it will happen.
That's
It's not
right.
necessarily a probability. It is based on the path you're seeing and how the numbers are playing out. There is that possibility. And I get what you're saying. I've seen you get attacked. I get it.
Yeah.
You're
Yes.
like, how dare you post this? And I'm going, what's wrong with you? And I guess everyone's trying to protect the little fiefdoms and everything else. But I tend to see opportunities in days in situations like this, right?
Always.
We
Yes.
have a real estate industry, and you probably are aware, maybe not, but last year in 2024 was not a great year for real estate agents. In fact, 71% of real estate agents did not make a single closing, a
Yes.
single transaction.
Yes.
That makes it very difficult to keep to even remotely even be part-time, much less full-time. And one of the things I've been stressing is that there's this thing called specialization.
Mhm.
That maybe the name of the game for real estate agents is to stop looking at real estate as a whole and look at niches that they can specialize in. And there's several different niches. And I've heard you repeat someone that said the 3Ds, right? Death, right? Divorce,
Mhm. Mhm.
and default. Well, you know what? I'm not the probate's a hot topic, but that's
Mhm.
not what we're talking about today. Divorce, let's just leave that off to the side right now. But default is a real deal. So there is an opportunity there for a real estate agent that wants to help. And I always say, please, if you don't have a heart to help, please
Yes.
just stay out of the game.
Yes.
But there's nothing wrong with doing well financially by doing good for others.
Right.
So, based on this right now, one of the things that I'm the most concerned about, and maybe you can either dispel this or whatever, is the number of FHA defaults that are happening right now. Is this an area that we might see a large number of foreclosures?
Sure. And so, kind of my point of, really starting with history is to give people an understanding of what has changed, as well as what's similar. But FHA was about 7% of the market. Like I said, now it is between 13 to 15% at over a 13% delinquency. Those numbers are wild. I mean, wild.
Now
But
13 versus 11. I'm sorry because
yeah,
I've been 11. So is that a more updated number to 13?
they just dropped the December HUD report, and so Tony, this is the other thing people don't understand. We don't have one good delinquency tracker out there. But the HUD loan performance report for FHA is the best one. You look at someone like Black Knight or Inside Mortgage Finance, they're going to say something around 11% because they just don't have everybody. And HUD is also going to count the Ginnie Mae buyouts, whereas Black Knight excludes those. And we can go into that if you want to. It's a little complicated, and around those securitizations, maybe we can talk about it if we have time. But the important thing is that, guys, that is crazy delinquency. And so what has saved them, last year was the partial claim supplement program where you didn't even have to buy the loan out of the securitization pool anymore, which is a big headache for the servicers. And you could just keep doing this over and over. Let's say you were late 6 months, you could do a partial claim. And then let's say you didn't pay another 3 months, you did another partial claim, and you did another partial claim, and you went on and on. And you could do that up to 30% of UPB. What we're seeing on the lower balance loans, because like the 250,000, 300,000, they've run out of their benefits. They are the most vulnerable to inflation and things like that. And so I kind of talk about it like it's a dam. They are starting to come over the dam
Mm-hmm.
into foreclosure. So in June of 2023 is when we really started to see FHA new delinquency tick up. But from there, you have the push and pull of loss mitigation, which is so aggressive. It's so aggressive, way more aggressive than it was post the GFC. Back then, we actually underwrote loan mods. You don't really have to do that anymore for most of the programs. And so that really, for the past 2 years, we've had this push and pull, but we are now getting to that point where people are running out of their benefits. So we are going to start to see foreclosures, FHA foreclosures, and Fannie and Freddie, because Fannie and Freddie has a great 25% reduction modification. Problem is, a lot of people, when they run the numbers because of increases in property tax and insurance, the payment's actually higher.
Yeah.
It's actually higher. And so that's not going to help anybody. Plus, let's just remember that those modifications during the last cycle didn't help a lot of people either. There weren't a lot of people that they saved. And so they just kind of, as Timothy Geithner said in congressional testimony, they foamed the runway for the banks. That was their purpose.
Mhm.
And so in reality, that's been the purpose of these COVID workouts, which, by the way, we're long past COVID, right? So why
Mhm.
are we still, if we've got a 4.1% unemployment rate and we're supposed to be at full employment here, why are we still doing such aggressive workouts? Well, we can talk about why those unemployment numbers really hide what's actually going on. Um, so I'll just stop there, Tony, and see, what thread you want to pull on.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's what let me remind everyone that the chat is open, but it's just kind of like it's all over the place. I think if you have a specific question for Melody or myself, please put it in the Q&A portion so that it's easier for us to find and to go ahead and to read. Now, on the FHA side, you mentioned that about 13 to 15% of all loans are FHA.
That's
I
right.
read a recent thing where it was 15%, but of the 131,000 new delinquencies, FHA accounted for 90%
Correct.
of those. That's
Yes.
insane.
It's absolutely insane. And I got to tell you, Tony, the shock I had when I started looking at these loans in detail, because that's something I learned from the GFC. You cannot look at aggregate statistics. You have to look under the covers because you will get nowhere if you don't start to understand what is driving those aggregate statistics. And so I started looking at these loans and I couldn't believe it. And then that led me to go back and look at old news and realize that in reality, we had removed the DTI threshold in the Dodd-Frank legislation in 2021. And so all of that credit quality gospel singing that was happening in the industry about how everybody was much better credit quality, it's just frankly not true. A lot of that is because credit scores were inflated because of the, forbearance, the moratoriums, and the Fed has recently come out with a great study of exactly how those programs and the student loan forbearance and more, basically shut down of that thing of having to
Right.
pay those, how those inflated credit scores. And I highly recommend, and I can send you this, Tony, so you can find it,
Okay, good.
that everyone read that study, because this is exactly something I've been preaching. The borrower did not have the credit quality you think that they did. And then we also have buy now, pay later. None of that is hardly any of it's reported to credit. We're about to have a firm starting to send that to Experian. But right now, we have no idea how many people are delinquent on that stuff. And so
Yep.
you take all of that. And so here's the thing, I want to FHA 13 to 15% of the market, over 13% delinquent. Okay. Privates, 3% of the market. That's your non QM, your DSCR loans, et cetera, over 12% delinquent. VA, between 3 and 5% at 4.5% delinquency. And these guys, again, with FHA and VA, it's really, you don't have to put a lot of skin in the game. VA
Yeah,
can be no down payment, FHA
exactly.
can be 3.5%. And those credit scores on FHA, you can go as low as 580. And in fact,
Yeah.
you can go lower with compensating factors. So we are not in the credit position people think we are. And I'm hearing from people out there that they're seeing credit scores drop to 150. Like, but I'm not 150, by 150 points, things like
Okay, I was
that.
gonna say.
I know, sorry. Although I have seen the lowest credit scores I've ever seen in this cycle, Tony. And I'm not, and my job was to watch credit quality deterioration.
Yeah.
So I
On
think,
the
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, on the FHA front and the amount of delinquencies, I believe there was a disclaimer that said that loans that were in forbearance are also included in that number. So do those stats include actual forbearance programs right now?
Yeah, but forbearance, I mean, it's just become it's gone back to its regular sort of functioning. You can't, you were able to get up to 18 months of forbearance, back during COVID. In reality, they only grant that for 3 to 6. They'll do a max 12 months, but it is more restrictive than it has been before.
Okay.
But yes, they include those numbers.
Before we move on to the short-term rentals and everything else, one final thing on FHA. There's been one gentleman in particular that's been raising a lot of eyebrows out there, kind of doing his FHA stories. There's some real horror stories out there on what's been happening with FHA loans and how some entity, is it the government or something? Have you heard about this? Have you studied that
Well,
aspect of it?
no, so John and I worked together on I mean, his analysis came from a conversation we had. And because once he had downloaded the Jenny Mae data, I said, can you do a life of loan kind of chronology? How many workouts did they take? Also, what's the redefault rate? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yes, absolutely. What's happening, you actually have origination shops out there that are coaching people that you never have to pay an FHA loan. And so we're seeing, and that's why that Wall Street Journal article, I think, really shook everybody up, because it said of the 51,000 loans that went into default in the first year. Okay. For those of you that have been in the industry for some time, you understand early payment defaults are your number one signal. Only 9 of those went to foreclosure. But why are they going delinquent in their first year? That is because you have so much fraud and speculation. The Philly Fed put out a study that said when there is investment in the housing market, by the way, the fraud did not stop after the GFC. They said typically 1 in 3 loans are impaired by fraud, which is insanity. And so you had the owner occupancy fraud when they lied and said they were, going to occupy the property, but they were actually taking the loan out for investment. Then you have, the fraud on the back end with this loss mitigation where people, I mean, honestly, who's going to pay their mortgage when they can turn around and say, and in our hyper financialized economy, when they can turn around and say, well, hey, I could take that 12 grand and go play in the stock market and get a better return, and then I'll pay my mortgage, right? At some point.
Yeah.
right?
Or maybe not. That maybe, again, from what I've seen and what John has written, you see people not make their payments for several months. The entity steps in, creates a partial claim mortgage, pays off what's in arrears. Maybe the person makes one or two payments, maybe three, and then goes right back into a long-term default again. And then the
Right.
process is repeated. It's
Yeah,
at some point it will end, right? At some point they just run out of games to play, and these folks are going to have to put their homes up for sale.
absolutely.
But by then, they're going to be so significantly underwater. One of the things that I would like to clarify, Melody, if I can, when I bought the CDP and brought it back, I made a couple of mistakes. One was forecasting that things were going to get bad sooner than they actually did, and I think you and I had a conversation about that as well. And the other thing that was still in my head was that everyone is just underwater. In 2009-10, for every 10 foreclosures, maybe 7 were underwater. So if you didn't learn short sales, you were out of the business. What's amazing is how many people, at least for now, are losing their homes, but have equity. And
Right.
no one is really talking to these folks about, if you can't stay in your home, doesn't it make sense to exit with dignity? Because that's what I teach. We want to go in there and rescue them. There's only so much we can do. But when you can't rescue them, you can help them exit with dignity.
Right.
And I've had a hard time convincing, not my CDPs, they get it, but the rest of the industry doesn't get it, that the people are approaching these folks, but it's the scam artists. Could you maybe talk about some of the most common scams
Yes.
that these distressed homeowners who are very emotional, they're freaked out. Many of them leave the property and the property becomes a zombie foreclosure when they had no reason to leave until they actually lost the property. So what are you seeing out there as far as the scams?
Yeah. So first I want to say truth takes time, Tony. And what you and I are talking about, we are preparing people. We're not saying this is right this second. There is some, don't get me wrong, but we are preparing people for what is coming. And so, yes, the scammers have been out in full force. Every time they see a notice of default, maybe they're even using something like property radar, they're seeing tax liens, things like that, which property radar will give you the phone number and address and email, and you can go and contact those borrowers. And that's what they're doing, is they're going to them, putting a card in the mailbox, we'll buy your home, or we'll figure a way out for you. And that can include what we've heard about, these subject to mortgages, where
Mm.
essentially what happens is investors, speculators approach a borrower in delinquency and they say, we're going to get you current, we're going to start making your mortgage payments. And a couple of things can happen from there. Either they find an investor to come buy that loan and kind of pay them out. And it transfers from the borrower. They might pay the borrower some equity as well and say, we're going to take over the payments. We're going to give you 10 grand. You're going to leave. Things like this. This is what they're doing. And actually, they're not recording the deeds often because they are nervous about the due on sale clause in the deeds. Because if the entity finds out you've sold that loan, they can make it all due and owing. And so, that's the sub two. You also have seller financing, where people have wanted to, and this is very much what's happening in the fraudster, investor, speculator class. They're trading houses like cards, and they're doing their own financing of these things. And that's not something that we have a lot of information on. If it's not sold within the MLS, we're not getting this information. So these private note space, these we buy ugly houses, all of these different things that are out there. And the private, and let me talk about the private notes specifically
Mhm.
really quickly. This is where your agencies, Fannie, Freddie, FHA, all of them do non-performing loan sales. What is that? A loan's non-performing, they want to get it off their books. They sell it out to hedge funds because the hedge funds can be more nimble when it comes to loss. They can do cash for keys. And this is the funny thing, Tony. A lot of this stuff is happening and we don't have any reporting on it. But they can do
Mhm.
cash for keys, where Fannie and Freddie aren't in the mood to do cash for keys right now, if you know what I mean. So,
Mhm.
there's a lot of saving of these properties. And what the hedge funds will do is that they'll say maybe they buy 3,000 notes. There's 200 of them that don't really fit their wheelhouse. They will then sell those out to individual private investors. And I'll be going back to a private note conference in Nashville in May, where I first encountered, Tony, servicers I'd never heard of. And I make it my business to know about servicers. So there's a huge space out there. You take FCI Lender Services, they are the biggest servicer of this stuff. They are at a 32% delinquency per inside mortgage finance. So we are clueless. And so your point about the scammers are already out there. They are, guys. They're doing everything. And the thing is about these sub 2 mortgages, somebody like you look at Pace Morby, think people like that, influencers, is that if there's no investor to actually come and pay that mortgage every month and they run out of funds, then guess who's on hook? The borrower.
The homeowner.
That's right.
Yeah, they're still the
The
borrower.
homeowner.
Technically, they're still on the note.
On the note. And what
Mhm.
so people like none of the investors realize is hilarious is that, you know, what we all decided after the GFC is that possession of the note is legal standing. And it's not if you record 85 deeds, it's possession of that physical note. So, you know, the possessor is going to be that mortgage company, and that investor is going to have, I mean, they're not even, it's like they were never even there. And that borrower is going to be in trouble. They will be foreclosed upon.
Wow.
So I'm
Now,
sorry. It's a
no,
lot.
no, no. Listen, this is fantastic stuff. I just, my mind is reeling as I'm listening to you. I'm looking at the questions because I want to try to get to as many different topics, but I have never been a fan of REOs. I know REOs are a thing. I have a good friend in the business that has the best REO class out there. And here's what I mean by not being a fan of REOs. I feel that if a real estate agent, a knowledgeable real estate agent, had been more assertive, more aggressive, and reached out to these individuals and provided them with solutions other than just letting the bank take the house, we would have fewer and fewer REOs. And I see so many agents wanting to be REO agents, and I go, you don't know what an REO agent does, do you? Because if you did, you wouldn't want to be. REO agents from back in the day say they had trouble sleeping. They felt terrible because they were the ones that were kicking people out of the homes and everything else. So my organization, the CDPE, we're pre-foreclosure stuff. I don't teach anything about once the foreclosure happens, it's done and all of the damage comes. But there's talk out there that we're going to have a lot fewer REOs because, well, one, people that have equity, hopefully they're going to be contacted by one of us. They'll sell, avoid the foreclosure, and walk away with some money. But do you think we are going to see maybe you already talked about this, that the institutions buying up properties like they did before? You said that that's not going to happen. So if we don't save them prior, then there will be more REOs then, right?
100%. And I mean, and the only way institutionals are going to get involved again is when it is, they have a return on investment. And that would
Right.
mean that home prices would have to materially correct. And so the institutionals are not there. They're not there to save it. And so you are right. And what I'm seeing right now, because I still oversee some mortgage books, is folks are selling at a loss in terms of they still have that equity, a little bit of it. And we're going to talk, we need to talk about the Fannie and Freddie equity because it's not what everybody thinks.
Okay.
But they still had a little bit of equity. But guys, here's the thing about Americans. If we think we have money, we spend it. And by the way, we do that because,
Yeah.
you know, consumption is 70% of GDP. Everyone, our media, our government depends on us spending money that we do not have to keep the economy going. And so even if they had that equity, they spend it elsewhere. They're levered up on credit cards or things like that. So what I'm seeing right now are the first signs, and recent one in California, of listing it for over what they paid in 2021, not getting it, having to take, a $30,000 loss, still in a decent equity position, but not decent enough to qualify for a refi. not decent enough to get out of this any other way. And so my point of all that is, Tony, your time is nearing very
Mm.
soon for a cohort of these borrowers. And so if you're okay, I'll talk a little bit
Yeah,
why there's not as much equity as everybody thinks. Now, on
go for it.
on the FHA partial claims, those non-interest bearing second liens get recorded. So
Okay.
when you're doing your research out there, you'll be able to see, oh, okay, this borrower has another lien. On the Fannie Freddie, the payment deferrals, which were the workout for those 18 months of forborne payments, not everybody did 18 months, but a lot of people did. They took those 18 months, they put them on the back of the loan, and they didn't record it. They did not record the payment deferrals. A lot of times your borrowers don't even know that they have that second lien because depending on how good the servicer is, maybe they put it on the billing statement, maybe they don't. You know, that combined loan to value. We actually have piggyback loans and silent seconds again, Tony, which is just insanity to me. And nobody's really looking at it that way. So CoreLogic puts out this mortgage equity withdrawal schedule where, and CoreLogic's methodology is to pull from recorded, records. So I emailed them and I said, so how are you factoring in the payment deferrals here? I got zero response. So until someone tells me differently, and I'm happy to be wrong about this, we're not seeing these anywhere. And in fact,
Quick question,
go
Mel,
ahead.
before I forget, because I always teach my agents that even when you think it's an equity sale, that you do a lien search ahead of time because
Oh,
people
100%.
they tend to forget that a HELOC is actually a mortgage, right?
Mhm,
And so
mhm, mhm.
if they did a lien search, you're saying those aren't recorded.
That's
But
right.
if the homeowner asks for payoff, would the payoff
That's how you'll
information,
find it.
that's how
Yep.
you'll find it? Okay.
On
So
the payoff
payoff,
quote.
we'll get it. Okay.
Yeah, the payoff will have it. But for people that are doing research and being like, oh, this looks great. Yeah, it's not there. So,
Okay.
yeah. And so that gives a very different, and there were, so they stopped counting. So, I'm apolitical. I sit right in the middle. But they stopped doing the report. As of the last report, it was 1.8 million people had taken out that workout. So you basically have at least 1.8 million silent seconds out there of up to almost 18 months of forborne payments. So let's just take a low balance loan. Let's say their payment was 2,000. That's $36,000 that the borrower usually doesn't even know is there. Because when they're in distress or they just don't want to pay, they're not asking any questions. And those billing statements, nobody cracks those open anymore. And even if they do, you sometimes, again, don't have that combined loan, loan to value, don't have that combined outstanding balance. So this is a perfect storm in many ways, Tony. There are
Yeah.
so many missing pieces out there that we cannot put our fingers on. We don't, I think I saw someone ask, what's the percentage of these non-performing loan sales that go out to these hedge funds? They're not telling us. They used to report on these things. They used to even report and tell you how these mortgages were performing, like how many mods were done, things like that. They don't report on it anymore. So we have absolutely no idea.
Okay. In terms of some of the areas that we as real estate agents should be paying attention to, or just everyone I think should be paying attention to, is the short-term rentals.
Yes.
I've been preaching that, the time is coming really, really soon where there's such a glut of these properties out there right now, and the returns aren't there. And not to mention that cities, states, countries, associations hate them. So they're,
Yes.
imagine having one in New York when New York said you can't have them anymore. Is this
Correct.
an area where we may see a lot of investors letting go of these properties?
We're already seeing it in Florida and Texas, and I'm seeing signs of it in California. I mean, so there's this great resource called Inside Airbnb, and it's totally free. And I feel like they deserve, I don't know, some kind of reward. And if you take San Diego, for instance, which came in number 2 for investor speculation behind Miami last year, they have a map that will just show you the little red dots that are these Airbnbs. And guys, it's an infestation. There is no, you would just be so surprised how many of these things are out there. There's over 12,000 of them in San Diego. I was just there. There's no need for 12,000 Airbnbs, 15,000 in Austin, no need. And to your point, Tony, people are getting angry. They don't want these things in their neighborhoods. They now realize that this is why their home costs so much. And so they are shutting it down. Last quarter, Airbnb did okay because they added international listings overseas, and there was more travel. People were going overseas because they were getting better exchange rates and things like that. They weren't traveling in the US though. And so many of these Airbnb operators are like, what's happening? Because none of them ever looked at the economy, ever tried to understand that. They watched an influencer that told them they could get rich quick. And so we are infested with these things, and they are coming to the market, I mean, in droves, especially in Florida and Texas, like I mentioned. And we're going to see more and more of these. And if you think they're not in your city, guys, I live in a tiny city in Tennessee called Johnson City. They're everywhere here. In fact,
Wow.
yeah. So, um, you are going to be surprised how many of these actually were, because really, if you look at our demographic picture, Tony, which nobody ever does, and you look at the history of existing home sales, I mean, the COVID boom was very busy for all of us. I remember I didn't sleep, I didn't eat, but it was nowhere near the levels of what we experienced in the run up to the GFC. Meaning that even though we've increased population, we saw existing home sales in the gutter last year,
Oh yeah.
worst in 30 years. And so this housing market, when it cannot rely, and really the mortgage market, when it cannot rely on refis, it's completely dead. Because we have pulled forward demand so much through the previous cycle and now this one. We have over 15 million vacant properties, and I'm not talking about abandoned. I'm talking about 15 million properties out there per the census, that are used either as second homes, short-term rentals, that kind of thing. And but so this whole idea, we have some kind of housing shortage. We have more housing per capita than we've ever had. So we have just been, the National Association of Realtor has been the largest lobbying firm in DC by spend, by the way, has just been doing everything they can to keep us convinced that the housing market was going to be okay. But we are staring down the wall of demographics. Harvard just did a study between 2025 and 2035, 15.6 million boomers will leave us. And then between 2035 and 2050 is 23 million. And they own the majority of the homes out there. And what I'm actually seeing a lot of right now are people who are in an heir situation, that either want to sell the property because they can't afford to carry it, um, or they're going to move into that property from their primary residence and sell their primary residence. So we are
Okay.
looking at consolidation for the first time in a very long time, Tony. In 2024, we saw average household size correct. Now, if maybe but what would be your guess as to what the average household size is in the United States?
In
Not
terms
to
of
put you on the spot.
people, the
Yeah,
the
like on average, how many people live in a home?
I guess 3.5.
So this is the stat we all remember, Tony, of an age, you and me.
Yeah,
we we
4.2 or something.
well, that's what it was when we first
Yeah,
started hearing about it, right? It's
right.
2.13.
Wow.
So the bull case out there is that we all start buying and living by ourselves. Okay? That's what
Hmm.
they think's going to happen. But if we're living by ourselves, we're not going to be having babies. And so we're already on our way to becoming Japan from a demographic perspective. I can share, a study from Harvard that'll show you what that looks like. But we are going to have millions of homes hit the market over the next 10 to 15 years. And of course, there's replacement rate, and some of them are crappy, and there's misallocation. But the fact that people think there's an inventory shortage, it's just not. It's just
Yeah.
not. And is it mispriced? 100%. Is it misallocated into short-term rentals or even long-term rentals that we don't need now that we've built more multifamily since the 70s and we don't have the demographics to support it? So there's
Wow.
just so much out there. And by the way, in what I also heard growing up all the time, and when I say growing up, I mean my early 30s,
Right.
um, was that it's cheaper to own than rent. Well, that has been turned on its head, and it's
Mhm.
now cheaper to rent than own in most cities in the United States.
Yeah.
So you've got multifamily competing for homes for sale as well. Go ahead.
Well, on the short-term rentals, I know somebody wrote in here, will just get long-term rentals. That would be okay if they own those properties outright and everything else. But many of these folks went ahead and got some very aggressive financing, right? With the DSCR loans.
Yes. Yeah.
So
And the
aren't
bank
those,
statement loans. Uh-huh.
yeah,
What does
they're
that sound like?
basically a
Yeah.
subprime
Correct.
loan. So
Correct.
there, those loan, the if they rented it long term, it won't be enough to cover the nut.
No, because they went into that non-bank originator and that originator told them, "Hey, you could take out one, but you could take out 10. Why don't you
Yeah.
take 10?" And they use things like Air DNA, which I use that. I was building a short-term rental underwriting program, and Air DNA never tells you that they'll send you the data and they have three scenarios, like the opportunistic, the really good, and then the probable. They set it at the opportunistic. And so when these underwriters were underwriting the loans, they would use something like AirDNA and it would say, like, oh, 55% of the year, you can have an average daily rate of $600. In Kyle, Texas. Okay. If you've ever been to Kyle, Texas, which is 20 miles south of Austin, there ain't no flipping way you're getting $600 a day in a short term rental. So were they not bright in the first place? Yes, but at the same time, the technology out there was saying that this was what was going to happen. And so there's a lot of people that are going to be caught, and be very, very surprised. And they're already very surprised. And the thing
Right.
about that long-term rental, so this is a trend I've been waiting for, Tony. I've been tracking rental listings for 2 years. I wasn't seeing much because, I knew the immediate thing would be when they had to, they would go to long term rental. But to your point, long term rentals like 1,200, 1,500 a month, where with short term rental, what they got the loan for was more like 10,000 a month. So it's not going to save them on the
Right.
back on the borrowing, right?
Right.
So
So I
what I'm
guess
seeing, oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, may I? So realtors out there, now is a great time to look up absentee owners, find databases of for rent by owners. And these are individuals that can and should be approached about whether maybe the time is right for them to go ahead and sell their properties. I also wanted to take Frederick here wrote, what percentage on the dollar are these notes being purchased by these hedge funds from the federal agencies? Are you saying that there isn't a lot of purchase going on, or if there is, are they getting them at a steep discount?
Some at a discount that would make it make sense for them.
But
So it depends. They auction them off, or they were
okay,
auctioning off. I've been hearing about FHA doing private, like getting preferred vendors and selling them to them without an auction. But before we leave the long term rental, short term rental point, I want to
yeah,
make so the listings, let's take Dallas. Listings for rent have increased 115% year over year. Okay. Dallas is a place where there is potential, bans on short-term rentals. But the point is, you've got a glut of inventory because not only did we build new homes, Tony, we had this thing called built for rent. So what people were out there, literally American Homes for Rent, were building new homes just to rent them out. And I've driven over 10,000 miles across this country to look at these, and they are everywhere. So you have more multifamily. You have now this built for rent. You have all the people that bought the short-term rental. Uh, but now they're trying to do it for long-term rental. And so you have all of these things competing at once. And what the rental market is doing is similar to the new build. They're giving you a ton of incentives, like 3 months free of rent. so they don't have to bring that top line rental price down, but it is coming. Yeah.
Okay.
So, sorry, I just wanted to make
No,
that point.
no, it's wonderful. And that's a good segue because I know that you track new construction, new home
Yes.
construction as well. And that is another area where a whole lot of folks don't realize that there's some stuff going on in that area, right?
Oh yeah. And it's actually crazy. So it's like, The Big Short, we remember the scene,
Oh,
the gators in the pool, the abandoned neighborhoods. Well, I got to be honest with you, when I went on the road, I didn't think I would see anything like that. But I was still just I just didn't understand why people thought we needed all this housing. I did see things like that. I saw already abandoned subdivisions. And there are so a lot of people do studies of permits for new builds. Well, we have unincorporated areas in this country, a lot of them in Texas, places like this. You don't need a permit. And so what I found when I went on the road is that yes, people like Zellman and others were actually getting the large national and regional builders, but they were not getting the small local builders, and which would typically kind of glom on to an existing new build area. I mean, when I went to Lakeland, Florida in 2023, I was floored. So yes, we have I now between San Antonio and Austin right now, if you drive that, it's just one big new build site. They're everywhere, Tony. It is absolute insanity. We have like over 8 months of supply right now. And what a lot of people argue, they'll say, well, new homes isn't a big part of the market. Well, they've become a big part of the market because they've been doing those rate buy downs and incentives. They'll give you like a year of free HOA dues, some washer and dryer, and a rate buy down, which really means they're not selling for the prices that they're telling you. But by the way, new homes are already way down from their peak, which by the way was revised. 5 years of history were revised way down. So the peak in new home prices is actually 20,000 lower than what it used to be because of those revisions by the census. So my point in saying that is we cannot rely on the figures that we're seeing, unfortunately, right now.
right. Back in the day, it was the adjustable rate mortgages. When they
Right.
reset, that was it. It was game over. And then we went through a period of time where it was just, fixed rate loans. We started seeing the arms coming back. And now you're starting to hear some horror stories of people that did buy 2 or 3 years ago with adjustable rate mortgage. They're resetting. And guess what? They can't afford the payments. Do you see that as something that's going to hit? And the other question would be is, what about buy down mortgages when they go to reset? Did the buy down mortgages ever really take off to be anywhere near a significant percentage, or maybe that's still in the works that when those start to reset in 3 or 2 years, those folks won't be able to afford those payments?
Well, it'll start in July of 2025. That's when the builders started in earnest with the buy downs, and they've been a big share of the market. So here's the thing, Tony, nowhere is this captured. Even if you look at Black Knight data, they don't have a lot of their servicers that report this to them. You look in the HMDA data, you really can't see it. So absolutely, I am working very hard, Tony, to try to figure out how many of these were, because it was not just the builders. You had Fannie and Freddie backing buy downs. You had Rocket and UW doing them. So there's there's so many more of these out there, and we don't have a number, but they started in earnest in July 2022, and most of them are 321s, and they will start like materially resetting in July of 2025.
Okay. VA, I know that there was a moratorium in place for a good part of the last year. I think there was talk about that the government was going to buy up all the VA loans and act as some kind of a bank so that these folks would not lose their homes. But the VA delinquency rate has been climbing steadily as well. Are you seeing that?
Oh yeah. And yeah, and they did bring some onto their balance sheets. And we had the VA foreclosure moratorium, which expired in December 2024. So one of the reasons we started to see foreclosure starts is because that moratorium expired. But yeah, and I honestly, I think we'll probably um, see Fannie and Freddie have to do something very similar as well. But we can talk that's on down the road. But yeah, that VA delinquency is also accelerated. And what I have heard from actual veterans have said this to me themselves, people that were stationed out in Hawaii, San Diego, they use their VA benefits to buy one of these short term rentals, even though that's not allowed. And so there is a lot of speculation there. And I think that honestly, the theme, Tony, that I think most people are not understanding is that housing is a casino and that really all of the demand since really 2004, 2005, almost all of it has been around speculation. Because to your point, we think the average household size should be about 3.5, 4.2, right?
Mhm.
That's not the case. And you can look, it's not just the seniors that are driving this, like, somebody dies or things like that. It's the younger cohort. And what does that mean? It means likely they're lying about owner occupancy. And I've talked to so many millennial couples that they maybe live together, but they also have another house because during the boom they bought one for passive,
Mhm.
investment for long-term or short-term rental, but then they ran out of money and they weren't able to rehab it. And so all over my city and all over cities that I've traveled to, you see these fix and flips like in a state of halfway done. They're not done. They're
Mhm.
abandoned. They're vacant. So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, listen, no, don't apologize. This is just amazing. I just want to be respectful of your time. I mentioned earlier that a good percentage of the folks that are losing their homes right now have some equity, at least for the time being. But the good question that I keep having asked all the time is, are we going to see a flood of short sales, not just a flood of foreclosures, but that we'll see a lot of folks be underwater. And then the argument is, but we're a equity rich nation. And then we find out that we're really not that equity rich if we have loans that are not reported, or we have folks that have borrowed against their property many times, that have HELOCs and everything else. Do you see maybe in the next 2 to 3 years or sooner that we could have a significant number of short sales out there?
Yeah, I think we probably will start 2026 would be when we start seeing them really start to tick up. And so, yeah, I think we will for the next several years. So, 2025 is the year where I think all the headwinds facing housing kind of come together and meet. Like think of a bunch of trains, coming
Right.
together. And so I do believe we're going to see price reductions on a national level this year. I could be a little early on that. It could be 2026, but I do believe we're going to see it. And this is exactly, although I never fight the last war, I'm always looking for new data. But I absolutely remember those loan to values and the degradation in them, starting from 2006. They all looked great then, too. 3 years later, no, not anymore. And so as home prices decline, then you're going to see that negative equity situation increase, increase, increase. And to the point about the Fannie Freddie payment deferrals, that's going to happen really fast because suddenly people are going to understand. And then the other thing I want to mention, Tony, especially when we're talking about supposed equity,
Mm-hmm.
Fannie Mae came out with an appraisal letter study in early 2024 saying they reviewed 7 million comparables. And of those 7 million, 55% did not properly list seller concessions, inflating the value of the appraisal. So I want everybody to understand that when they look at their estimate, because nobody's made repairs in the last couple of years because they couldn't afford it. And so when they go to sell it, or when they go to try to access that equity through a refinance, then that's when they're going to understand the value of their property is not what they think it is because they haven't made those repairs. And we just have more and more inventory coming to the market. I mean, we are seeing increases non-seasonally. that you never see. I mean, typically between February and March, you go back to 2017, maybe a 1% increase in the inventory. We're seeing over a 10% month over month increase in inventory. And I think that is just beginning. And so, as those people in the 3Ds, and I add a D, I add the Department of Defense because they move a whole bunch of people every year as they need to sell, and they will, and I'm being contacted by these people, then you are going to see those price reductions at the margin and they will impact your comps. And so very soon people are going to be looking at that Zestimate going down, down, down. And then that is when we will get into that negative equity situation. But right now, it kind of depends on what happens in the stock market a little bit because that drives a lot of sentiment. It kind of depends on what kind of government intervention could happen. Right now, the administration seems to be taking a hands-off approach as to how quickly this could be. But I really think probably you're going to start to see that material increase in short sales in 2026. But I think after June of this year, they're going to be there.
Okay. And I like to get to some of the questions, but also from a consumer perspective, because again, if we're doing things the right way as real estate professionals and we engage someone that's behind on their mortgage, we want to do everything possible to see if they can stay in their home.
Right.
What do you find that consumers in those situations that they could be doing differently or better to possibly be able to stay in their home permanently or maybe for a longer stretch? Back in the day, I think the stat was that 50% of distressed homeowners never even spoke to the mortgage company. They wouldn't answer the phone, they wouldn't respond or anything. So what could consumers do to help their own causes?
I don't think anybody's going to like my answer.
Okay.
They
I'm
have to
sitting
stop.
down, I'm ready.
No, they have to stop spending. I mean, like, this is
Yeah.
get out of debt. Like, this is, debt is not cool. Like, we are in a nation enslaved to debt. Like, stop believe so mainstream media is all about getting you to spend your money that you don't have. This is why buy now, pay later is such a huge
Yeah.
thing. But yes, talk to your servicer. Please call them. Like, what's interesting, Tony, is I remember those stats. I remember the people that didn't want to call in because they were embarrassed, right? Well, we got a lot fewer of those now. What we have now are the no contact is the investors who know they're never going to call in. They're going to walk away,
Okay.
and they might let that property go to a tax foreclosure, right? And in Texas and Georgia, foreclosures go very quickly.
Yes.
So when the counties who are now starting to hurt, the municipalities are starting to hurt because they got about uh, in the CARES Act, 320 billion went out to all these municipalities, and they started living large. But now that money's run out, and they are freaking out, and so they will start to have to recoup money somehow because think about them as home prices decrease, so do assessments, so do taxes. So you've got all kinds of craziness happening all at once.
Yeah. Melody, you have a lot of relations with servicers. You talk to them all the time. During 2008, 9, and 10, they regarded the CDP as an amazing resource because our agents did put those short sale packages together in such a succinct fashion that they could get those approved quickly. Do you think that servicers are open this time around to letting homeowners know, by the way, there is another option besides just letting the bank take the house if you consider putting it for sale? Should I, as the CDPE guy, approach servicers and see if they're willing to establish that type? I know they can't give us the name of the folks because of privacy, but maybe just say, look, here's this group here that tries to help people. You think they'd be willing to have a conversation like that?
So I think that maybe not some of them would be willing right now, but as the months progress, they're going to be more and more willing. I talked to a big servicer yesterday, And it's the first time I've been talking to them since probably October of 23 because of what I was seeing. I knew they needed to be staffing up in loss mitigation.
Right.
And they were in denial about it. And that always happens because they think it happens overnight, but in reality, the signs are always there. And so, but there was awareness on this phone call, awareness that I had not heard in a, like, I have not heard in this part of the cycle at all. And so I think you might be able to talk to a couple of them this month, few more next month,
Okay.
whole bunch more. I think this is just going to be a snowball, Tony. And unless they come up with some other loss mitigation program that, we thought haven't thought of yet. But I actually lay in bed trying to think of what could they do to save this. And I really have not been able to come up with any answers.
Yeah, I know back in the day, the CDP had a seat at the table. The former owners were invited to go to Washington and sit down in these meetings because um, I think we helped somewhere near a million homeowners avoid foreclosure, which
Amazing.
accelerated the recovery time. So we
Right.
want to be that resource. It's just like
Right.
I said at the very beginning, every time I go knock on the door, they just slam it in my face like, no, we don't want your message. So, but you're seeing a shift, right? From when you first came out and people were attacking you, it's mellowing out a little bit, and people now they're willing to listen and pay attention, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it is actually shocking how much less hate I get now. And so it is a subtle shift. And I think that the administration is also giving that message. And so, but even NAR, even realtor.com, they're talking about price cuts. They're coming out. People, the fact that, so I had to laugh, Tony. There's some little history between me and Black Knight. And when they put that headline about FHA out there, it was because of what John did, what I've been doing. Not
Mhm.
they came kicking and screaming. But it got to the point that they couldn't not talk about it anymore or they would have severe egg on their face. And so the narrative is changing. Now, the administration could come out in the next couple of months and say, "Oh, we're going to save everybody" or something like that. Who knows? I
I don't
don't
get that feeling.
I don't get that vibe, right?
Yeah,
We're looking
yeah.
at what's happening in the markets today. I don't get that vibe. And so I think it's just a matter of time. And like I said, it's a snowball. And if you think about when the CDPE did start to get that seat at the table, it was probably a little bit later in the cycle, right? It was
It was,
probably
yeah.
like 9 or 10.
Yeah.
And so I think that, 2026, 2027, those are going to be years where people in Washington are going to want to talk to you. And the
Okay.
servicers are going to be desperate and need your help again. And so what I've really kind of seen the last couple of years as is just setting the baseline, setting the foundation, trying to create trust in what what I'm saying, so that when we get to this time, people will start to listen to us because we've stayed steady throughout this, just talking about the fundamentals.
And back in the day, there was a disproportionate number of minorities that were impacted with everything that's going on. Do you see a repeat of that this time around, just because of the nature of FHA?
It's so sad. But yes, I do. And especially in California, the Hispanic population and actually, origination increased, household formation increased the most for Hispanics last year than any other cohort. But yes, they're going to be adversely impacted and
Impacted, right?
probably more materially than their, other cohorts.
Mhm. You mentioned that maybe from a resource where real estate professionals can get data. I know there are services out there like RedX and CoreLogic and and different things, Atom Data. But you mentioned one that was it Property Radar or something?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna call them this week and say, you know what, you need to sponsor me because
Yeah.
they don't sponsor me now.
What? We'll get that changed. We'll talk to
Right,
them.
right. But they have great data. And I have several clients that use it, and they give you all the tax liens, all the property liens, owner liens. They give you divorces. They give you what are the vacant properties, what are the known non-owner occupancy. So I actually, for people in your position, they would be very beneficial, that data. And it's not really cost prohibitive.
Okay. Well, that's what we need to see is we need to see the agents. The listings are not going to fall from trees.
No,
That's what I think. People, if a consumer ever reaches out to one of us, it's usually when the sale date is about 2 days and 3 days away, which just makes our job so much more difficult. And by the way, if you're out there and you're new to the whole pre-foreclosure thing, please understand the only time it's too late for you to help that homeowner is when the auction is taking place.
that's right.
You
That's
know, I,
100% right.
yeah,
Yep.
there's just so many agents and this is why education is so important. Agents will actually ask me, listen, there's a sale date coming up next week. Is it too late for me to help them? I go, no, you got to get it listed.
Yeah,
You
you
got
got
to
to
do your,
move.
you got to get that,
Yep.
get that short date, that sale date pushed back. And depending upon whether you're in a judicial state or non-judicial state, the process is different. But absolutely, there's an opportunity to help those folks. And that's, again, it comes with education and it comes with getting out there and actively talking to people. Is there any advice before we take some of these questions that you can give real estate agents? Because we really can be the tip of the spear if we're out there aggressively mobilizing. So what should the audience be doing right now?
Know your market. Like, and I don't mean what Zillow says. That is not knowing your market. You
Okay.
need to understand the macroeconomic indicators, which is what I discuss all the time in my Substack. And I put a lot of data in the free version. But know your market. Know what the percentage of over 65 is in your market. Know what the percent of younger folks is in your market. Know whether your market has declining population or not. A lot of them do. Know what the median income is. Really get an understanding of where the trouble spots are going to be in your market. And the other thing I say, Tony, and people may think I'm crazy, but it's like just drive around, and drive around at night, because you will see things at night that will, I mean, guys, I cannot emphasize enough how much vacancy there is out there. It is everywhere. And so drive around at night, start to get a sense of like, are these properties actually occupied? Like, what's going on? And you'll see this all over California and Florida. I mean, but it's everywhere. So get to know your market. Use resources like Property Radar to really get to, I had a client this week where they were like, I'll never be able to afford in this city, but I think I want to start, maybe if the correction happens. We go into Property Radar, we see all these tax liens, we see all this distress that is not showing up anywhere in any figure. And he's
Yeah.
like, holy cow. And I was like, yes, have optimism, my friend.
Okay.
So anyway.
There's a great question here. Charlotte wrote, do you think that Rocket's acquisition of Redfin and now if the Mr. Cooper, because I think both of these deals are not completed yet. Is this an indication of anticipating a lot of defaults?
So I think so. I think
Mhm.
that what they're saying to the market is it's about refi recapture, from Coop. No. Um, this is, you look at behind the scenes, they are both significant FHA lenders and servicers in the top 10. Mr. Cooper has a very aggressive debt maturity schedule. In fact, they had one of their big facilities terminated last year. They are both going to be in a lot of trouble very soon. All of the mortgage companies got a little boost last quarter because when rates rise, you get to write up the servicing asset, because you make an assumption that prepays will slow, right? You'll have less
Mhm.
refinances. Well, guess what happened this quarter? Rates went down. So your non-banks are about to get a double, triple, quadruple whammy. Originations won't be there to keep them going. They're going to have to write down that servicing asset while at the same time, significant expense increases due to default activities. And now that we have these cuts at these agencies, what I heard from the servicer yesterday is that they're starting to see delays in getting emails back on loss mitigation from the agencies, and they're starting to see delays in getting claim payouts, which will be huge for them. So, yes, I think that's why. But if you read the news articles, Tony, they're going to tell you it's going to be about refi recapture.
Right. So just 3 quick questions here. And then before we conclude, I definitely want, please share your information on your Substack and everything else. But in fairness, I know the one question is, can you explain DTI threshold? That's the debt to income. You're saying that FHA raised it so high that there's some people that are getting into a home with 60, 65 debt to income ratio kind of thing. So it's kind of insane in terms of they really should not be buying a home, but they were able to get financing.
Yeah, so there was a cap written into Dodd-Frank. The GSEs had a patch. They never actually had to completely comply. They had kind of like a runway to get there. By the time they got there, that cap was removed. And so you're seeing debt to income of up to 59% for FHA. For Fannie Freddie, we are at levels that exactly where we were in 2007. So, yeah, they removed so I think it was 43% or 42%. They removed that requirement. They said there's compensating factors that you can look at for ability to repay. But guys, they removed the teeth from it. And so it's not just FHA. This was the Dodd-Frank.
And it makes me think a lot of areas have down payment assistance programs.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and
yeah.
that's accelerated the ability for a lot of folks to get into homes. And I've heard from lenders say that that's one of the worst things that can happen, because it's just, these are a lot of defaults waiting to happen. Is it just because the standards are just so loose that these folks are getting that money?
Yeah, Tony, it breaks my heart, and it's why I do this all the time. My family, we lost our home to foreclosure when I was 9. What ensued from there was, divorce, all kinds of mayhem, and so when I think about these young families that took out loans they can't afford and what it's going to do to their future purchasing power and what it could possibly do to their marriage, I mean, it's just so upsetting to me, and why I do this, because they went in with the best of intentions. And they were, they were told, like, you can do this, you can refi, you can date the rate, you're going to be just fine. No. And so these folks are going to be hit very hard, and they're going to need your help. And that's the message, right?
Yep, absolutely. One last question here. Can we still count on the CFPB?
It depends on what you're counting on them for. I have a very different experience with them. I was there when they were created. I was there when they finalized the national servicing standards. We were all part of that. It was actually a nice moment when they listened to the industry. But then what proceeded from there was a lot of collusion with the AGs. And so you would have the CFPB come in and, beat up a servicer for something that the AGs had already beat them up for, and something that was easy pickings, because the technology in the industry is just so bad. Any of you that have ever worked in Encompass or on, a servicing platform understand that. So, I honestly, can you count on the CFPB? They became very ineffective, in my opinion. The one service that I think that they do is that consumer complaints dashboard. But in reality, the servicers never change. They've learned how to follow the procedure. But it depends on what you were counting on them for. But in reality, they've, in my opinion, lost a lot of efficacy over the past, really 8 years or so.
Okay. And someone wrote here, what's your advice on how to reach people that have NOD? Shameless plug for my designation and training is that's what the CDPE is all about. Our goal is to educate the real estate agents on how to communicate and approach these homeowners. Oftentimes it's about dialogue. These folks are going through a very difficult time. Sometimes they're their own worst enemies. You're reaching out to them with the intent of helping them, and then all of a sudden they turn on you. But please understand that I think that too many of us in real estate have dollar signs in our eyes as well. Are we really looking at these distressed homeowners as someone that we can potentially help, or are we just looking to get a listing so that we can get a sale so we can get a commission? And I think you have to search your own heart. We believe that much is accomplished when we help them stay in their home. How much do we earn in commission? Zero. But the compensation goes beyond money. It's what you did is just amazing, and you probably get referrals for the rest of your life. Now, if there is no other option, they can no longer stay in their home. Write these 3 words down: exit with dignity. There is no dignity to be shown to the curb by the sheriff. Okay. And when you have foreclosure on your record, it's going to impact your ability to get financing again in the future. It's going to impact just about everything you buy. So what we do is valuable if we do it the right way. But yes, get the right training. Get the right training so that you're prepared, because just because you can doesn't mean you should. If you're a licensed real estate agent, you can take a short sale listing, you can take a pre-foreclosure listing, but if you don't know what you're doing, you're doing them a tremendous disservice. You're putting yourself and your brokerage at tremendous risk. So knowledge is important. Melody, how can they reach you? I know I have your Substack. How can you put that in the chat area there so that we can go ahead and make sure that they get this information from you on an ongoing basis, your Twitter handle, X handle, all this good stuff, so that they can reach out to you or at least be in contact with you?
Yeah, I will figure out how to put this in the chat here, but I'll say it while I'm doing it.
Yeah, and then, you know what? You send it to me, and I'll
Okay.
include it in the email that'll go out to everybody, because the question is being asked: is this being recorded? Absolutely, it is. When is it going to go out? If not this evening, no later than tomorrow. And I'll make sure that the email includes as much of the information that Melody provides to me as well.
Yes. So you can find me on X Twitter at M3_Melody, Melody, on Substack, M3 Melody Substack, and on YouTube, M3 Melody YouTube. So, I do a lot of free info in the free newsletter component. I do a lot of free data. So highly encourage everybody to sign up for it, because I really am not in this, although I have to make a living.
Yeah.
I'm not in this for that, guys. This is a passion, and I feel very blessed, and that's the word, blessed, that I can live my purpose, which is to inform people about what's going on and the path in front of us.
Wow. God bless you, Melody. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And I know you've taken a beating along the way and everything else, but there are a lot of us out there that truly appreciate what you're doing, and you're making a difference. You truly are making a difference. I think you've inspired, you just haven't only educated our group today. You've inspired our group. You've inspired me. So thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. And maybe in the very near future, we can do it again. We'll have some more updates and everything else. So, all right. Well, folks, that's
truly my pleasure.
Hey, thank you so much. And I see the comments there. Everyone seems to be pretty happy. All right, folks, let's get out there and help as many folks avoid foreclosure as possible. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.